I'm Andy Serwer, and I want to welcome our guest, Michael Tien, member of the Legislative Council in Hong Kong and founder and chairman of the retailer G2000 Group. Michael, nice to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good evening and good morning, Andy.
It's great to see you. So Michael, I want to start off by asking you about the COVID situation in Hong Kong and China with the travel restrictions due to the dynamic zero COVID strategy. So we're hearing reports of nearly half of the foreign businesses in Hong Kong say they're planning to relocate somewhere else. Do you think this is really going to impact Hong Kong as a financial center and shifting that power balance maybe to Singapore or Japan or South Korea or elsewhere?
Well, Andy, such an important question. There's of course some shift, and Hong Kong has witnessed this before in the 1983 to 1994 period, where many families went to UK, Canada, and Australia. But a lot of them came back after 1997. Hong Kong is a revolving door of opportunities. And as long as China and the East Southeast Asian region is still the growth center of the world, I believe Hong Kong will remain at the geographical, economic, and financial heart of the region. Once the COVID restrictions are lifted, I think you'll see a rebound of tourism and financial flows. The world is heading towards a recession, attributed to the COVID lockdown impacting on China, the Ukraine war in Europe, and the rising US interest rates, as well as this coupling, or less shall I say decoupling of the supply chains. But the fastest growing economies right now are still in the East and Southeast Asian region. Vietnam is on schedule to grow nearly 7% per annum. Philippines at 6.5% level. Now, these are both 100+ million population-sized economies. Indonesia is the 5th largest in the world by population and growing at 5 to 6%. So once the COVID restrictions are lifted, I see Chinese consumer confidence coming back, but much will depend on the set of policy, which nobody knows until they are reviewed after the 2 key meetings in China this month. And that is the 7th plenary session of the 9th Chinese Communist Party Central Committee and the 20th National Congress of the CCP. However, given the complexity of geopolitics, I think Hong Kong must be ever more innovative and promote developments in finance to create new markets and products. For example, true green financing backed up by knowledgeable regulators and reliable rating agencies. Commodities trading, the newest thing now in town is carbon credit trading. All these to sustain our lead as an international financial center. Of course, everything is built upon the integrity of our regulatory regimes.
So with the global pandemic, though, Michael, China has pushed forward the domestic international dual circulation strategy to reduce dependence on foreign markets. How could overseas businesses tap into the China market to maximize these business opportunities?
For audience who may not be familiar with this domestic international dual circulation, it basically means the domestic market and connecting with the world. Hong Kong plays a key role in the international circulation part, I believe. Now, there's a lot of talk of multinational corporation businesses leaving China. Now, no CEO can afford not to diversify risks with supply chain disruptions that we have seen recently. But if you look at foreign direct investment in China, they remain strong because there are still businesses that realize that the internal size of the China market cannot be ignored if we even want to be global in scale. So I think businesses are recalibrating how to engage the Chinese market with their comparative advantages. Some of the old profit centers, such as real estate business, will probably not be there anymore. But the technology area, or rather using digital and organizational skills to improve business in China, is only just beginning. Web 3.0 is only just starting, and how to use artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics, and local stories to engage the Chinese customer must be the way to go.
So another impact of COVID-19 has been the detrimental impact on the hospitality industry over the past 3 years. Yet the WTO has recently announced the pandemic is coming to an end soon. We were just talking about that off camera, Michael. Do you see there's a new model of overseas traveling, and how do businesses maximize the business opportunities?
I think consumer travel will be constrained by higher energy costs, and it is no longer as cheap to travel. But I think in the short run, the urge to just get out of lockdowns is so great that we will see a surge. We have not yet begun to see the future wave of outbound travel from, let's say, India, which is likely to repeat the Chinese outbound tourism of the recent past. So I'm not pessimistic on global tourism. However, I think tourism of the future will more be knowledge-based, not your simple sun and sea, but more cultural, scientific, hobby-related, in which the traveler will widen his or her horizons to see how different countries behave in their different viewpoints, design, music, crafts, etc. I think there'll be more market differentiation and less one-size-fits-all models, such as shopping.
Want to talk about manufacturing of apparel, because more and more manufacturers in apparel and other manufacturing industries, as you mentioned, I think, are setting up production lines in Asian countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia. As a founder and chairman of the fashion brand chain G2000 in Hong Kong, to what extent do you think this trend will have an impact on China? And what are your thoughts on the future of this trend?
It's time to get some numbers into this discussion. If I compare garment production out of Vietnam and China at this moment, China export to the US, they slap an extra 7.5% tariff. And that's a pretty big difference in terms of competitiveness. With regard to shipment from Vietnam and China to the EU, today, if you make a piece of garment and ship to EU, okay, so for shipment between Vietnam and China going into the European Union, if a Vietnamese factory used Chinese fabric, the tariff is the same as a garment made in China, but they use fabric made outside of China, they're already paying half the tariff. And my understanding is that in a couple of years' time, Vietnamese production going to EU will have zero tariff, where China will continue to be, how should I say it, encountering a stiff tariff going to the EU. So in terms of the two circulation that we talked about, the international circulation in terms of garment manufacturing doesn't look good, okay? Particularly when anything that has cotton in it, I don't think really a lot of the Western countries are now buying from China because it's a sensitive issue. I think for the domestic circulation, that is what's keeping the Chinese garment manufacturing sector alive, because it's huge, and it's growing. And in that area, even Vietnam or Cambodia production cannot really tackle that demand because it takes too long. The domestic consumption cycle is like 20 days. So you need factories based in China that can turn around the whole production run in 20, 25 days. And then in the domestic market, the average size of a production run is much smaller, could be a few hundred pieces per style. But when a Vietnamese factory accepts an order, they're talking about thousands or tens of thousands. So the future of garment manufacturing in China, I honestly believe, will be really very much domestic based.
I want to shift gears a little bit, Michael, and ask you about transportation, because you were the chairman of the Kowloon Canton Railway Corporation board. You left that position, but you've also provided valuable advice on the development of transportation in the city. What are you seeing there after COVID? What are the changes and challenges to Hong Kong's role as a transportation and aviation and shipping hub?
This is a question that deserves a hopefully insightful answer. More so than ever, our key strength is in aviation. And our air cargo handling business will grow exponentially over the next 5-10 years due to the perpetual growth of e-commerce. Air freight-wise, we have 5 billion metric tons last year, which I think put us in first place among all the airports in the world. And this is really due to the transshipment in and out of China. Currently, Hong Kong holds 65% of all the international flights within the Greater Bay Area. So in terms of our international circulation connecting with the external world, we have more flights to different cities, 65% combined with all the other cities in the Greater Bay Area. But unfortunately, our domestic flights to various cities in China are very, very limited because many cities don't actually have airport border clearance. So what we did is that the airport authority, which runs the Hong Kong airport, now invested in the Zhuhai airport. And recently, we have a huge mega project called the Macau-Zhuhai Bridge, which I'm sure you've heard of, right? 26, 30 kilometers, whatever, that connects our airport with the Zhuhai airport. Now, Zhuhai itself, all the flights are domestic, all right, to various parts of China. So when you connect Hong Kong and Zhuhai with the bridge, you're basically having a vast international network of flights connecting to Zhuhai, which has unlimited growth in terms of domestic flights locally. So in terms of passenger transport, and even in terms of logistics, the combination will give us a tremendous competitive advantage going forward. This is on the air freight side. Sea freight, I have a feeling our future is grim. We're being marginalized anyway. Our cost structure is too high. So, all right, so that would be the future for us. And we just finished building our third runway, okay, with $100 billion investment. And so that's gonna also increase our capacity.
That's fascinating. And because you think about shipping and you're telling me the future is all about the air. So
it's all about the air in Hong Kong.
Yeah, interesting to see how that unfolds. And I know about Zhuhai and Macau and the bridge. I've been there, so that's fascinating to see all that as well coming to fruition. Let's shift gears a little bit and want to ask you about live events. conferences and such. Again, coming out of COVID, large scale events probably are going to be coming back. But how is that playing out in Hong Kong right now? And do you think we're going to get back to where we were before the pandemic, Michael?
Well, honestly, we have a lot of catch up to do. Just a couple of months ago, we can't even go out to eat at night. Passengers flying in from overseas have to be quarantined at hotels for 21 days. Would you believe that? 21 days. Then the 21 becomes 14, 14 becomes 7, 7 becomes 3, and now I'm pressuring government to make it 0. So 0 hotel quarantine. One of the things that I think Western travelers definitely do not feel comfortable with is PCR tests upon landing, because our standard is actually quite high. So I don't think any tourist or people attending large-scale events would want to buy a ticket, plan a week in Hong Kong attending a major event, not knowing whether he or she would be tested positive when they land, even though all the rapid antigen tests that they do on their own every day before they board the flight is negative. All right, so I've been convincing government, trying to persuade them to drop the PCR test in Hong Kong and just do rapid antigen test. And that is something that I'm still trying to push them to do. If that can be done, I think we are back in business. We're gonna be getting these large-scale events back. The only thing that will continue probably for a while is the requirement to wear a mask, okay, when we are watching these large-scale events, right? And the reason is because our vaccination rate for people that are 60 years and older in Hong Kong is still not 100%. There's about 300,000 people, which is 5% of our population, that belongs in the 60+ group that have not been vaccinated. And that group is very high risk if they actually get infected, all right, because they have no vaccination. That's why we have this masking requirement when you are outdoor. When you're indoor, you need to be vaccinated before you're allowed in. So that's no problem. So when we finish vaccinating this 300,000 or the bulk of the 300,000, there's a good chance we'll throw away the mask. Then we are totally on the same footing with Singapore and other places. But I don't think people attending huge events, large-scale events, concern themselves that much if they're required to wear a mask. Probably much less than having to take a PCR test and then end up 7 days, spending 7 days in an isolation hotel.
Yeah. Well, we're all figuring it out. Michael, final question. You've obviously been very successful in Hong Kong in politics and in business. You've been educated in the United States at Cornell and Harvard. Big question. What can the West, the United States in particular, learn from Hong Kong and China? And what can Hong Kong and people in China learn from people in the United States and people in the West?
Well, I think we need each other, and competition should be healthy and all-encompassing. I would hope that both China and the US can continue to trade and share their know-how and grow together, and not really fighting for the #1 spot to decide who is the dominant force in the world. If you look at, the history of the human race, there have been different centuries of dominance by certain countries. Is it really necessary that every few hundred years there has to be one country that dominates? I think we're entering an era where it could be a sort of co-dominance, or maybe even three, so that if you see these huge population centers around the world, they are all growing at different speeds, and they have their own culture, right, and their belief and their political system, all right? If they can all work together and join forces, so that we don't have to always ask ourselves, who is the number one? Maybe, there are companies with, two co-chairmen, right? Not every company has only one chairman. Sometimes they have a joint chief executive or joint chairman. Why can't we have something like that that would make it so much more effective, rather than having these trade wars? And of course, ideology is something that cannot be compromised, okay? So each of these systems have their own ideology, the way they govern themselves. But economically, I would hope that they can all work together. And I think with the number one enemy I see today is not nuclear war. It's the fact that if we don't get rid of our carbon emission by 2040, 2050, you don't even have to think about war. We'll all be steamed. It's actually becoming a serious crisis about our use of fossil fuel and everything. And that requires every country in the world to work together. And I don't see whether today, sometimes when a country changes leadership, they somehow change their position on their previous commitment to carbon reduction. And it takes all these 190, 200 countries to all be in it together. Not one country can help this issue if the big population centers of the world continue to have all these carbon emissions. So that is the one thing that really, I think, mankind today needs to face on a global scale.
Some very thoughtful and optimistic, I would say, perspective. Michael Tian, member of the Legislative Council in Hong Kong and founder and chairman of the retailer G2000. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Andy.